On HT Insight today, we focus on the unexpected contraction in the US economy and the specter of recession staring at the Biden administration. More important for us, however, is should India be worried? And that's the question we focus on today. Hi, you're watching Hindustan Times Insight, and I'm Aditi Prasad, and with me is the paper's editor-in-chief, Sukumar Ranganathan. Sukumar, first things first, is the US economy actually on the cusp of a recession, as many are pointing out? Because there are many who would also disagree, including the Biden administration itself.
Yeah, there are the technical definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of contraction in the economy. The US economy contracted last quarter, it's contracted again in the most recent quarter.
Right.
So clearly they are in recession if you were to look at it in terms of classical economics. It is just that there are other people who think that it is not really a recession. For instance, the Federal Reserve has got a slightly broader view. And the reason it has a broader view is simply because it was partly responsible, or it was responsible to a very significant extent for this contraction by raising interest rates to bring down inflation. So they're saying we did it, so we know there's not a fundamental problem. But the fact is, the economy has contracted for 2 consecutive quarters. It is a recession. The NBER, which is the US body which will eventually rule whether it's a recession or not, usually does so well after the recession is over, because they look at all the data and say that, okay, great, we were in recession at that point in time, but it is clearly a recession. Like you said, this is a significant blow for the Biden administration.
Right.
He's not been doing too well in terms of his ratings. This is not going to help. I think it also means that in 2024, when we get to the US presidency race, there's clearly going to be significant churn that you see. I know we are not discussing politics, but I must add here that the last week, Trump pretty much soft launched his campaign for 2024.
Right.
So, things are happening, things are moving.
And one would really never imagine that to happen, that the people, the US was so vehemently against Trump, and now there are voices that are already saying at least
part of the
Biden
US was
better.
vehemently against Trump. You must remember, this is a man who got more votes, more of the popular vote than any winning president before. Forget losing president, any winning president before. So, of course, it was also because more people came out and voted. So I don't think you can write him off, but I just think that this is a blow to the Biden administration. Of course, the more charitable view of looking at it would be to say that the recovery that the US economy saw starting after the pandemic, and it was really marching forward, and last year all economies in the world did well because they were all bouncing back from a historic and record low. That is over. It's well and truly over.
So, before we get on to the India part, just quickly, you said the Biden administration, this is a huge blow for them, chances of a churn come 2024 because of the economy now. Can you just, in a nutshell, what could Biden have done differently? Is it this administration's fault, or is it the fault of the post-COVID recovery path that's been a bit shaky for all countries?
Good question. Actually, very tough question. If we knew the answer to such questions, we'd all be doing something else, I can assure you. But let me try and encapsulate what went wrong. Part of the reason why inflation was uncontrolled in the US as well as many Western economies was the kind of relief package that they handed out. And you remember back then there was a lot of criticism of India, including by us. We felt at that time that India needed to put cash in the hands of people. We still feel that that was the accurate position back then. But a lot of these countries, I think, went overboard. Far too much money in the hands of people, far too many checks in the mail. And I think that's come back to bite them in terms of inflation. And then to control inflation, you obviously raise interest rates. What could they have done differently? Multiple things. A focus on building large infrastructure projects, a focus on government spending, a focus on creating more jobs. A lot of these things could have been done, didn't really work out for them. And you're beginning to see what it's resulted in. But the main reason why this happened is obviously because inflation was uncontrollable. You had to raise interest rates to control inflation, and that's reduced economic output.
And spiraled into the situation right now. But let's talk about other countries. There was a time when the US sneezed and the entire world caught a cold. Um, the recession in the United States today, how does it impact the rest of the world and specifically India?
See, the rest of the world is not doing well either. You must appreciate that fact. In many of the Western economies, it's partly because of the same reason. Huge relief packages, mainly focused around cash handouts that went to people, uncontrolled inflation. It's a problem in the UK, and it's a problem in parts of Europe. So that is not going away. The Chinese economy is not doing well. Even by their official numbers, their economy has been expanding at record low rates, and these are their official numbers. So now if you were to look at unofficial numbers, you don't know where it's going to be. We've all been reading about the run on Chinese banks. I'm told the situation is far more alarming than anything that has come to light so far. So clearly the global economy is not doing well, and this is evident in revisions most recently by the IMF this week in global growth.
But they've also cut India's growth.
Yeah, but global growth is more significant because the global growth has come down from a little over 6% last year to just over 3% this year. And the latest revision is around 40 basis points, which is 0.4 percentage points. India's has also been cut, but India's growth is still 7.4%, I think, 7.4, 7.5, which is 7.4. Not a bad number at all. Of course, what the actual Indian number is should be seen. Our own estimate is that it could be anything around 7%. It's not bad for an economy of India's size to grow at 7% at this point in time. Not bad. But of course, our problems are different, and I'm sure we'll talk about them.
We'll talk about it. But first, let's talk about what we got right. That we are in this relatively better position vis-a-vis the rest of the world. What did we do right? And then, of course, we'll come to the challenges.
I think one of the things that we did right was the contours of our relief package, largely focused around providing relief to the most vulnerable communities and sections of the population, as they should have, which is great, which is food, a little bit of cash handout that went to women with Jan Dhan accounts. You remember all of those, which we did in 2020. And then the credit schemes that were launched for both large enterprises as well as for small enterprises. No real handouts of cash to enterprises. These were credit guarantees, which means loans are given to them, but they're guaranteed by the government. So in case there is a default, the government will take care of it. But in India, unlikely that small enterprises are going to default. Many of the defaults are by larger enterprises, but that's a different question. That meant that a lot of the money actually went into productive assets, the money that didn't go into actually giving food to people. 800 million Indians were receiving free food, still continue to receive a certain quantum of free dry ration, as they call it. But the rest of the money went into productive assets, has had a cascading effect. Clearly, a good strategy to follow, although it didn't look like it at that point in time, because the reason we felt at that time that it was not great was because even before the pandemic, aggregate demand in India had been coming down.
True.
And we were hoping that cash in the hands of people could boost that aggregate demand. That we still have the demand problem, right? It's not been solved. But of course, we have other issues. But because it went into productive assets, our inflation problem is largely an imported inflation problem, largely because of oil, and oil it's because of geopolitical issues, not controllable. Commodities, as several analysts have pointed out, there is volatility not in commodity supplies in many cases, but in commodity prices. So it was a commodity price crisis, not really a commodity supply crisis. And I think we seem to have tided over that. Even oil, it's off its peak. So we seem to have tided over that crisis. It could be temporarily, I don't know, given the volatility in the environment, I don't think we can say that it's over. But because of that, I think we are in a relatively better place than many of the other economies in the world. parts of the Indian economy are growing, but I think we'll come to that in a bit.
Right. So, when we're talking about the challenges that we're facing, and I think the biggest challenge which we as a nation are probably talking about is the rising inflation again, like the US, and of course, the supply chain problems because of the Russia Ukraine crisis. Are these, is there more to it than meets an eye? Because there are systemic challenges with the Indian system which have been there for the longest time. Are they being heightened because of this current situation?
I don't think so. See, I think you'll have to break it up in parts and look at it. The Indian financial system, at one point in time, was plagued by bad loans. That problem has been well and truly controlled now. So I don't think that is an issue. Inflation, like we discussed, is an imported problem. It's not a local problem. Our real problem is one of what analysts call K-shaped growth. The larger companies and the middle class and the rich are doing well. And in India, you don't need to earn too much money to be rich, right? Given how the income bell curve works out in this country. And the smaller companies and poorer people are obviously not doing too well. So it's a K-shaped recovery. Inequality is rising. That is the real issue. We need to find jobs. Where are we going to create jobs? Because even before the pandemic, whatever growth we saw, a lot of it was jobless growth, which is the nature of. But on the positive side, huge investments in infrastructure, capital spending by the government, many of it going into asset building, which obviously leads to a cascading demand for cement, for steel, hopefully will create jobs. Right. But the challenge for India is in managing this inequality. The challenge for India is in managing sentiment, because consumer sentiment, while it has improved, is still low, which means people are not feeling very confident about going out and spending money on stuff. But again, let me counterpose that with what we are seeing. Through 2020 and 2021, contact-intensive services were doing very badly. Right, with basically services, any kind of service. From beauty parlors on one side to dining out, to travel, to leisure, to entertainment, recreation, all of those things.
But that is
booming, right? I mean, not just bouncing back, it's booming. Yeah. It's what, I mean, people call it revenge travel and revenge eating out and revenge binging and everything else. You can call it whatever you want, but there's a huge bounce back in that. And so clearly the services sector is doing well. But the question is, what's going to help drive the Indian economy this year? Last year, we were helped by a variety of factors. The fact that, one, the pandemic was over, so there was a little uptick in whatever demand was coming locally. Our exports did phenomenally well. This year, because of the recession in the US, which is our largest trading partner, and because of slowdowns in many other Western economies, our exports will come down.
They are not dependent. A very small percentage.
No. Exports. US. The US is our largest trading partner, right? I mean, we export significantly to the US. So it is important that our exports continue to grow, because our exports give us the buffer, especially at a time like this. And so I think managing the economy this year will require a much more nuanced approach. So far, especially compared to the rest of the world, we're doing quite well. Right?
But to continue that momentum, the government has its, and the policymakers have their jobs.
And there are multiple factors, right? I mean, it just the number of variables that are involved in this are staggering. Like, for instance, monsoon or the quantity of rainfall in paddy growing areas, because paddy cultivation is still, our paddy sowing is still lagging last year's acreage. And it's lagging it because we haven't had rains in parts of the east, including East Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, other eastern parts of the country where rice is grown. And we still have enough stock. Doesn't worry, not cause for concern. But the fact is, it is lagging last year. So the production will also probably be lower than last year, because there is no point in, you know how it works, right, with the monsoon. It rains in patches, and if it rains at the wrong time, the weatherman may well say, oh great, monsoon was normal,
but
because
the crops,
but the crops don't get rain at the time when they get it. So you could have a normal monsoon at the aggregate level, and you could still have a crop that fails simply because you didn't get water at the right time. So there are all these variables that are involved. Not going to be easy. The recession in the US just increases the challenges facing the Indian policymaker, but we've done well so far.
We've done well so far. I think that's some brilliant analysis, Sukumar, and I hope our viewers are a little more informed about the recession in the US on the one hand and how it's impacting India. Of course, we are doing relatively very well compared to other economies like the United States, Russia, China, but in order to sustain that, the policymaker has his task cut out. But thank you so much for watching this broadcast. Do send us your questions, your queries. We'll try to answer them. And stay tuned to Hindustan Times.